The Conservative Party, the party that has been in government in the UK for 14 years up until just a few months ago, has now chosen its new leader. And that leader, rather as expected, is Kemi Badenoch. The turnout of the election was respectable-ish at 72%, somewhat down though on previous votes, largely reflecting the fact that both of the runoff candidates were considered to be on the right of the party, having seen the loss of James Cleverly from the list. Presumably, there were some who would have voted for that relative centrist Cleverly who did not feel that they could bring themselves to vote at all for either of the two that were left on the list. Now, for me, as a floating voter, what I look for when the election time comes is first and foremost, is the leader within sight of the centre ground? And secondly, are they competent? What we don't know with the election of Kemi Badenoch is exactly how that equation is going to look in 5 years' time, which is when the election is most likely to happen. But I have some thoughts, contrary to partisans on the left, who will assume she will be a populist who can easily be marginalised, and partisans on the right, who think, or at least hope, she will track sharply in their direction. For one thing, during the election campaign, candidates have the incentive to emphasise their right-wing credentials above and beyond anything else, because that's the nature of the electorate that they're playing to. Doesn't necessarily speak to the candidate's ability to take their core beliefs and values and turn them into language and into policies that can appeal to the centre when the time comes. Which is not what you might want to do if you see the mission as being to attract back into the fold those who left the Conservatives for Reform UK, for instance. But it is what you have to do if you actually want to become Prime Minister and form the government of the United Kingdom, at least the United Kingdom as I've understood it for the last 50 years. Arguably, Margaret Thatcher achieved this. She was certainly to the right, quite a radical by the standards of the political spectrum as it existed at the time. But she knew how to speak to ordinary people. She knew how to frame what she was trying to do in words that would resonate with them, and hence she was one of the most successful election-winning politicians of the modern era. Could Kemi Badenoch do something similar? Maybe. Unlike her opponent in this leadership election, Badenoch did not jump straight in to tie her hands by signing up to policies that the base would approve of. Robert Jenrick did indeed jump headlong into the commitment to, for example, to leave the European Court of Human Rights and to set a cap for immigration numbers. These are the sorts of promises that are easy to make to a Conservative base 5 years from an election, before any scrutiny of potential consequences has hit the public sphere of discourse. But intriguingly, Badenoch refused to play that game. She said, "This leadership contest is not a test of who can make the biggest promises. It is about character." And she added, "We are not in government anymore. It doesn't matter what our policies are right now. We cannot deliver them. We are in opposition, so let's use that time wisely." I find this pretty encouraging as a first indicator. Firstly, to have the clear-sightedness to know that the contest is about the person, about their character, not the policy. And secondly, that the Conservative Party, if it is to be fit to return to government again in the future, needs to end its period of division and reunite its various factions. So, about the ECHR argument of her opponent, she said this: "The ECHR argument is not the right one. I think that is the biggest weakness. I think that will divide our party. It will mean that the infighting and the squabbling will continue. We need to come to a consensus." Her basic conclusion on the ECHR was that there are positive as well as negative aspects, which means the trade-offs need to be carefully considered. Before the debate where this was said, the received wisdom was certainly that the candidate who pledged most wholeheartedly to be the most red in tooth and claw populist right policies would get the membership vote. But Badenoch didn't do that, trusting perhaps that her previous high-profile anti-woke campaigns meant that she didn't have much left to prove, which shows both courage and a degree of leadership qualities that means she's not afraid to talk to the party about where they should go, not just reflect back to them where they already want to go. It's kind of a delicate balance, getting that right. If you go too far, then you're left out on your own. Interestingly, Jenrick was preferred over Badenoch by Reform UK voters. The fact that a significant number of Conservative members left and went to join Reform UK could even be the thing that meant that it wasn't so straightforward this time, in terms of how you appeal to the base. However, Badenoch's position in the debate was well argued, seemed to be better received by the audience, and the polling since consistently put her as the front runner. A leader whose right-wing credentials are taken on trust can often take actions with more freedom than a centrist who is kind of tolerated by the base on sufferance, as Rishi Sunak was. It can be the positioning for someone who knows that a broad party has to be recruited onto sides for the journey and who weighs up the pros and the cons very carefully. That could be the sort of politician who will ultimately be capable of winning the trust of floating voters in an election. Obviously, not guaranteed. She conveys confidence, intellectual capacity and political competence, but that could turn out to be an illusion. And the role of leader pretty quickly and rather brutally often sorts out the wheat from the chaff. And even if in a different era she might have been superb, she does inherit a political party that has gotten into the casual habit of internecine warfare in recent years. A number of the centrist former ministers have elected to return to the backbenches and to refuse to serve in the new shadow administration. That's one clear indicator of the challenge she's going to face. Now, Badenoch is known for apparently being abrasive in private, so whether her undoubted skills will extend to actually being able to build committed support behind her, that also remains to be seen. In the short term, the job of a Tory party leader, of course, is to provide opposition and accountability for the Labour government. All governments need to be held to account and to be challenged. The danger of one like this one that has such a huge majority is that it will feel it can ignore objections and counter-arguments and just do whatever it wants. I do think, at least, that she will make Keir Starmer's weekly Prime Minister's questions something of a trial, which is good. I mean, even if you support the government, and like most floating voters, I want them to succeed, not to fail, because that would be better for the country in which I live. But even the best policies get sharpened up and improved when subjected to high-quality critical scrutiny. And the worst policies definitely need to be challenged, obviously. Our country will do best and will resist the populist nonsense that's infected the United States more robustly if it has a competent government held to account by a competent opposition. That's the ideal. Labour hasn't made the best of starts, but may get better as they get the hang of the job of government and as they get challenged to be better day after day by the opposition. That's the hope anyway. Not entirely encouraged by the big borrowing, big spending first budget they put forward, to be honest. And if Labour doesn't improve, then it will be highly vulnerable. That vulnerability, as much as Kemi Badenoch's leadership, may get the bulk of the party to become united enough to persuade the country that one term out of office was enough to recharge the batteries. Nobody would have predicted that the day after the election. Right now, it does seem as though anything is possible. Reportedly, Tories who had been resigned to being out of office for more than the next decade have suddenly come round to thinking politics has become so volatile, Labour have started so badly, maybe victory at the next election is back within the realms of possibility. Standing in the way of that would be Reform UK, of course, which has the ambition to replace the Tories as the mainstream right-wing party of the UK, and you can expect won't happily sit back and watch a resurgence. Indeed, in the week this video is being shot, Reform UK are holding a conference in Wales, specifically. Apparently they believe that with the Welsh electoral system for Wales Assembly and the general demographic of Wales being what it is, they could become the official opposition in Wales on a short timescale, which would be the sort of momentum boost they would be looking for. Shows genuine strategy. We shall see if it pays off. The UK's first past the post system does still make it enormously difficult for any third party to overtake one of the two major parties. So for both of those sides, for the time being, there's everything to play for.